Hello, I'm Dave.
And I am Rob.
And welcome to the Doctor Who show's Alternate Galaxies that we are issuing in the month of October 2025. Rob, this is the third of our little triptych of episodes on the Star Trek movies where we are covering, I like to call it Star Trek 8. The studios call it Star Trek First Contact.
Yes, here we are, Dave, at the end of the Yellow Brick Road. Has it been everything you wanted it to be, this little project of 3 Star Trek films? Because this was your baby.
It was. And I think it has been. I have genuinely enjoyed talking about Star Trek. I am a Star Trek fan, more so than you are. You like Star Trek, but I have much more Star Trek stuff on my shelves than you do.
Yeah.
Which is a good way to measure, I think. So, yeah, I have enjoyed doing it. I don't think this will be the last time we ever talk about Star Trek, but it is this set of movies. Now, we did put out a poll, Rob, to say which of the next-gen movies should we talk about, because I've got stuff to say about all 4 of them. I could talk about any of those movies, good and bad, and one of them's terrible.
Yep.
But we got a tie between First Contact and Generations.
First time we've had a tie on any poll we've done for anything.
Yes, it's actually quite incredible, because there was a good, 100 or so votes in that poll.
Yeah.
So we did agree we'll talk about First Contact tonight because we both have probably more to say about that than the other ones. But in deference to the audience, sometime next year we will do something on Generations, probably paired with a Star Trek adjacent movie. We'll just tease that one. But that's for next time. But if you did vote for Generations, if you wanted us to talk about that, you wanted a bit more Captain Kirk in your life, or you thought, you know what, everybody talks about First Contact, I get it. We'll come back to you. We will not leave you hanging.
Yeah, and if you really want to blame someone, blame me, because as the person who put the poll out, I can't actually vote in the poll. So it was actually my casting vote done offline, so to speak, that tipped us over to doing First Contact. So blame me if you have to, guys.
No, absolutely we will. We will. Letters to Rob at the Doctor Who show, care of Postbox, something in your capital city. Yes. Do they still do that these days?
I don't know. Probably not.
No
one sends snail mail.
No, send a stamped self-addressed envelope.
God.
First Contact, Rob. This was broadcast on the 22nd of November, 1996. The writers were Brannon Braga and Ronald D. Moore, with some story input by Rick Berman. The director, and I'm sure we'll talk about this guy, Jonathan Frakes, or Commander Sexual Harassment Riker. Oh, sorry, Will Riker. The budget for this movie, Rob.
Yes.
This is a big blockbuster space movie. Budget, $45 million.
Yeah, wow.
It's so tiny. Even adjusting for inflation, it had a budget in today's dollars of $92 million US. But from a $45 million budget, this made $146 million at the box office. And that's before you do merchandise sales and sales to TV networks and all the rest of it. In today's money, that's $298 million off a $92 million budget. In any money, this is a very clear, big commercial victory for Star Trek.
Yeah, that's a raging success. And I'll just say, there's a lot of YouTubers I subscribe to who talk about film and such, and they often talk about how films just cost too much these days. And I think that's a great example that even when we do factor in inflation, they're making this for less than $100 million. And you'd think, well, what would it cost to make this today? I'd say this would be like $150, $200, maybe $250 million film.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And look, it's a pet little sort of theme of mine that there are a lot of movies that are made for sort of $150 million now that barely make their money back. But you go, if you'd made that for $70 or $80 million, which you really could have, you'd have had a nice little sort of $20 million earner. So very, very well budgeted, very, very well made in that sense, and made its money back. As always, Rob, we'll just say it is spoilers from here on out. This movie is 30-odd years old, so if you haven't seen it, pause the podcast, go watch it, and then come back, or accept there will be spoilers.
Absolutely.
We always start these little look-backs, Rob, with our memories of when we saw it first. So when did you see this first?
Well, Dave, I think as people have gotten used to over the past couple of Alternate Galaxies episodes, Star Trek wasn't really a cinema experience for me. I cared, but just not enough to go and see the films. But when I look back on this one specifically, because this is late 96 it came out, at that time I was actually working a job between 4 p.m. and midnight, Monday to Friday. I literally wasn't around 5 nights a week to do anything. So my ability to see films, not just Star Trek, but any films with my pals was greatly reduced. So between the Star Trek not really being a cinema thing for me and this job I was working at the time, this would have absolutely been a VHS new release down the local video store, I presume sometime into 1997, whenever it released. And yeah, I thought it was pretty good. As far as I can remember back 30 odd years ago, it certainly doesn't stick in my memory of being, oh God, that was the shit one or anything. So, thumbs up.
So Rob, I have 2 anecdotes about seeing this movie. Mm-hmm. We mentioned in the last couple of episodes on Star Trek that I didn't get to see any of the original crew movies in the cinema, but I did see Generations in the cinema, and I did see this in the cinema. Mm-hmm. And the 2 anecdotes I'm going to tell them both because they do, I think, reflect important points about how this movie landed at the time. Now, at this stage, I was a very active member of the Doctor Who Club of Victoria. I was also really probably at the peak of my Star Trek fandom at this stage. I was reading the books. I was buying the non-fiction books, the big making-of books about Star Trek series. I was watching The Next Generation, which was still being broadcast on terrestrial TV here in Australia. Even though they're up to the second movie in the cinemas, we were still getting, I think, season 7 in about 1996. Mm-hmm. I was getting the Deep Space Nine VHSs because that was so far behind in Australia. I was buying the VHSs because they were quicker than getting it on free-to-air. All the rest of it. So I was very much into Star Trek. And the Multiverse Group, which was a conglomeration of local sci-fi clubs here in Melbourne, the Doctor Who Club, Star Walking, and Enterprise, and the Red Dwarf Club, and a couple of others, they had a little conglomeration where we'd sort of co-host and share events to help make a bit of money and make sure that there was a turnout. They hosted a fundraiser, which was not an advanced screening of First Contact, but the day of screening of First Contact. So it's late November in 1996, which means in Australia it's about 36 degrees outside. And everybody met at the old Melbourne Town Square, which doesn't exist anymore, but the old Melbourne Town Square, which was a bit of a dump. But we all met there, a whole bunch of the dedicated Star Trek fans dressed up in costume. Everybody's in their Starfleet outfits. Deep Space Nine had just hit domestically here, so there are a couple of young ladies who were dressed up as Jadzia Dax, complete with the tattoos down the side of the necks.
Were you dressed up, Dave?
I was not dressed up. I sort of aloofly stood back.
I was going to say, I didn't think that was your thing.
No, I aloofly stood back in my school blazer and quietly just sort of let all the Trekkies do the Trekkie thing. And then
so you were there as Turlo.
Oh, thank you. And then they paraded up Burke Street to the cinema. The old, for Melbourne listeners, the old Hoyts on Burke Street. We went there and we all watched it. So it was a room full of Star Trek fans, Doctor Who fans, Red Dwarf fans, Star Wars fans, like people who've come to an event like this on the first day that it's released in the evening on a hot summer's day. And I can remember the anticipation of everybody says this is going to be really good. Because Generations had hit, and for classic Trek fans, it was a poor send-off to Kirk and the others. For Next Generation fans, it was like, well, they didn't get their own movie. It's a Kirk movie. No one was quite satisfied with it at the time. I think it's aged well. Mm-hmm. But everyone was like, no, this is really good. Jonathan Frakes is directing. It's got the Borg. Like, everybody just sit back. This is going to be great. And there was a real sense of anticipation in the room. And then when the opening credits started with that Jerry Goldsmith theme I'll talk about a bit later, and just the names came through, everyone got a round of applause. Patrick Stewart, yeah! Jonathan Frakes, yeah! And this sort of went on, and then it said Alfre Woodard, and there was a sort of 300 fans going, huh?
Right.
Which was quite a funny moment. And then as you went through, the big moments got big cheers. Data's one-liners got big moments. The moment where the Captain says he's going to blow up the Enterprise and he says, don't worry, there's plenty more letters in the alphabet. There was this sort of rumbling through the cinema of, are they actually going to do it? 2 movies in a row? Would they do it? Wow. Mm-hmm. So, you really felt those moments in there. So that was a very big thing with fandom. About a month later, I went to the Boxing Day test with some mates from high school, and it was rained out. So they said, let's go see a movie. I was like, yeah, cool, we'll go down to the Jam Factory and see a movie. And they said, oh, let's go see that Star Trek movie. It looks like a good action movie. I'm like, yeah, I'll go see it twice. So it was not just a movie that fans were very excited for. The thing I'm trying to say is that this was one that non-fans were also like, hey, I've seen the trailers, I've heard good things, this looks like an exciting, fun movie, let's go see it. And that's where this movie sort of landed, and you can see why it is one of the most successful at the box office because of through those two anecdotes.
Would you say it's the closest Star Trek's ever been to being Star Wars? Because Star Wars attracts people like that.
I think that is very much the case. And there's a point I want to build off that in a couple of moments' time, if I can just hold off for a moment there, Rob, to explore that.
Yeah, sure.
So, look, we'll just pause that thought there and say, any headline thoughts watching it now?
Well, this was possibly my first watch since seeing it on VHS back in the 90s.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I can't discount that it's been on TV one night and I've seen half an hour of it or an hour of it or something.
Yeah.
But in terms of, I am going to sit down and watch Star Trek First Contact, start to finish, as something I actually want to do. Truly, this might have been the first time since the VHS. I mean, I own the Blu-ray set. I watched it on Blu-ray. I've watched other films in that Blu-ray set. I haven't watched this one before.
Wow.
Yeah. But what's even more interesting is that I'm currently, as Doctor Who show fans will know, am in the middle of a great journey watching all of DS9. So when Worf flew in commanding the Defiant at the start of this, I'm like, aha! The Thing from The Thing that I'm watching. And I wouldn't have known that back in the day, as I wasn't watching DS9 back then, so there's another level instantly this time around watching it. And it actually sent me scrambling later to see how it married up with DS9, and I learned that apparently it can be placed between The Assignment and Trials and Tribulations, two early Season 5 episodes, which are funnily enough episodes I'm watching just now, like what a weird coincidence.
Wow.
But I noticed that in terms of anyone saying, hey Worf, how was that fight with the Borg? Or hey Worf, how was your time back on Earth? You know, in DS9, no one does that. And conversely, in this film, no one's like, hey Worf, how's life on DS9? You know, and the idea that his ship survives, because in DS9 it's just there the whole time. Here it's trashed. You think it's blown up. I thought Star Trek did this stuff better. I thought they integrated stuff better. So that was one of my thoughts this time watching it. Like, this doesn't quite marry up with the DS9 that I'm watching. I mean, it does marry up in some ways, but in other ways, I think they could have thrown in a line here and there, Dave, for it to marry up a bit better.
Yeah, that's a really good point that I was going to bring up, but I'll do it now. And that is, I do think that they bring Worf back in this movie really quite well. It makes obvious sense that the Defiant was originally designed to fight the Borg. So, of course, they bring the Defiant back to fight the Borg in this movie, and that's a good way to bring Worf back. I compare it to sort of as they get further and further into the next-gen movies, and it pretty much literally gets just to them sort of walking down the corridor and going, oh, Worf's turned up, that's cool. And
yeah.
Nobody really sort of even is pretending anymore. I think there is like one line in one episode of Deep Space Nine that's along the lines of the Defiant's been repaired successfully or something, but it's
okay.
It's proper blink and you'll miss it, but it is actually a bone of contention for me, and I think a lot of fans, particularly of Deep Space Nine, that yes, there isn't a greater reference of the Defiant's role in the Borg fight in Deep Space Nine, in the same way that the Enterprise, the flagship of the Federation, doesn't turn up to do any of the things that, spoilers, Rob, are about to happen in Deep Space Nine. It's really weird how they kept those two franchises almost totally separated.
Yeah, because again, I thought Star Trek was really anal, if I can put it that way, about doing this sort of thing. They're really into integrating things. Yeah,
they were, and this is a really weird one. And again, it just sort of adds to my sort of bitter feeling that Deep Space Nine is the black sheep of the Trek franchise, that they sort of just wanted to keep over in itself, sort of being naughty and un-Gene Roddenberry-esque, and nobody's allowed to talk to them. You know, that's the crazy uncle you don't talk to in the Trek family.
Right. See, watching it so long after it went out, I don't have any of that context. I'm just watching it and enjoying it.
Yeah, yeah. Which is great. And look, I watched it and enjoyed it too. I think that the problems that I've had with it have grown up over time, and I'm going to talk about them. And they're there, and a couple of them really annoyed me, but this occasion I was able to just sit there and enjoy what is a very good, fun action film. Mm-hmm. Although I have got some concerns with it we'll get to in a moment. I just want to say where this really stood out in the Star Trek universe at the time, because it is almost sort of the very last crest of the wave, I think, for that era of Star Trek. Obviously, The Next Generation finished a few years before. They're now getting their second movie. Deep Space Nine is now well into season 5. Yeah. The week that this opened, the episode broadcast was Things Past, which is well into season 5. Voyager is only up to season 3, but it's important to note that Voyager hasn't had Scorpion Part 1 and Part 2 yet, which is the one that people who try and convince me that Voyager's good say, no. Once Scorpion happens, it's a whole new show. You've got to like that. So it hasn't had that big moment yet, which really transformed Voyager. Out there in the rest of the world, Babylon 5 is falling towards apotheosis. So it's starting season 4 by this point, which was much later than I'd realised. We are 4 months from the debut of Buffy season 1.
Wow.
And we're in season 3 of The X-Files. So it is that quite barren sort of landscape for sci-fi. And let's face it, Doctor Who... 6 months ago, we'd had the telemovie come and vanish, and everyone's gone, well, I guess that's it for Doctor Who then.
Yeah, what a time.
Yeah, so it is this time where Star Trek was doing a lot of the heavy lifting for sci-fi, and its sort of bigger series are either done or moving on, and I think we can say in terms of box office, its biggest movie is happening. This is sort of the peak before, I think it's fair to say, it is all downhill from here.
Amazing. Yeah.
I want to start with the opening, Rob, because I think that it's a really strong opening. That scene of Picard as Locutus inside the Borg cube where they pull out and 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 pull out. I did watch this time just going, we need to remember when we first saw the Borg, it was the 80s. It was the late 80s. And look, they looked pretty cool. Next Gen had $1 million budget. It had at a time when Doctor Who had a $1.3 million pound budget for a season, Next Gen was doing $1 million an episode. So
and had a lot more episodes.
So, it looked pretty good. But you watch The Next Generation now, and you can see that it's a late 80s, early 90s show. You watch it now on a high-definition television, and you can see the sticky tape on the carpet to mark things out. You can see the black paper that's been used to black out areas of console where the studio lights are shining for that shot. It's quite a cheaply made by today's standard show. But when you see that opening scene with the Borg, as it pulls back, you go, okay, this is the Borg as they wanted to do them. This is the Borg with serious money, and that is quite a wow shot.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. A very, very impressive shot. Because it takes something very familiar. They haven't redesigned them in any way or done anything like really, really weird. It is what you know, but just done so much better. And I think that's the best way to do these things.
Look, absolutely it is. We'll talk more about the Borg as this goes on. You then get that sort of weird intro to the movie of, we've got the Borg coming, yes I know, and you're not invited, okay. Which is a nice sort of setup, I guess, for the casual viewer, that Picard has history with the Borg, but it does feel a little bit like a pause before you get to the action.
Yeah, and it doesn't last very long anyway. It seems within a minute or two he's like, stuff it, let's go. We're going to join in.
Yes, we do though get our first shot of the Sovereign-class USS Enterprise E, which I had not seen a single photo of before I saw the movie. So seeing that for the first time, a big CGI, thank you B5, a big CGI model of the Enterprise, I did look at that and go, okay, wow, that's quite sleek. And it actually didn't occur to me, I didn't realise until a few years ago that the Enterprise E is actually smaller than the Enterprise D.
It would not occur to me at all. I'm just not into the ships as much as you, obviously. Is there any reason for that in universe?
Yeah, so the Enterprise D, the Galaxy Class 1 from the series, was meant to be the technology unchained, and we all just sort of fly around in great big luxury hotels with our families and just explore the galaxy in a genteel sort of way. And by the end of Next Gen, they're like, well, there's the Borg out there, there's the Dominion out there, there's the Cardassians out there, the Romulans are coming back. Maybe we need to make sure our lead starships are actually a bit sleeker and a bit more militarily focused, and we don't bring along our kids.
Right. Oh, that's cool. I like that. Yeah.
And once I realised that was the case, I've gone, of course, that's really cool, but I just assumed every Enterprise is bigger than the last one. But no, that was not the case.
Yeah, because the D, I can just imagine walking around. I'm sure the carpet would be very plush. You would sink into the carpet.
Yes.
It would be very nice. Yeah.
Yes, it is very, very 4-star hotel.
Yeah.
Rob, can I get into my biggest problem with this movie at this point?
I saw this on the run sheet, and I'm thinking, what is his biggest problem? I wonder if it's something I've got in my notes. I don't know. This is exciting.
So this is something that others have identified before. I'm not unique in this,
okay,
and not everyone will agree with. But let's go back to our discussions about the classic Trek movies when we talked about Star Trek 2 and Star Trek 6 and some of the others in there.
Yeah,
and we made the point that although Kirk has to age in those movies, and we debated how well they aged him in different movies, Kirk arrives in those movies as a ready-made American movie action hero. Captain Kirk, going right back to 1966, is an all-American, fighting on the frontier, holds a pistol, gives as good as he gets, throws a punch, and in the last reel gets the girl. Mm-hmm. He's that character. So when you're doing a movie franchise, you go, we've got our lead. And if the movie needs that he can fight people, beat them up, get the girl, throw a few lines, whatever the case may be, he's a ready-made movie hero.
Yeah.
We get to the Next Generation movies, and you've got Captain Jean-Luc Picard, who likes to do archaeology in his spare time. And he quotes Shakespeare. And he gets laid maybe twice in the course of 7 seasons of the Next Generation. No, 3 times. I can think 3 times, maybe, if at most 3, I reckon. And he's not known for it. He doesn't like to fight. He's a diplomat. And so now you're a studio going, we're going to have a big American action movie. And we've got a guy who quotes Shakespeare rather than, getting laid.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess we'll just have to reinvent his character and reinvent the vibe of the show and just kind of make something that's completely nothing like the television series that happens to have some of the same actors playing similar characters in it. And I'm not saying that's the wrong decision because clearly, as I alluded to at the start, fans are excited, but non-fans are excited as well. Clearly, people turned up and bought tickets. And is it a good, exciting action movie? Is it Die Hard on the Enterprise? Yeah, it is. But I'm not sure that turning Patrick Stewart into John McClane is a really good move that, over time, has really stood the test of time.
I didn't make any notes about this specifically, but I did make a note that apparently Stewart was one of the very few cast members who had a role in developing the script. I'm now wondering, did he insert all this stuff because he wanted to be the John McClane of the story? Did he want to be an action hero, Dave? I know how that plays well more broadly with people. But it does also make me think, I think back to this time and just decades past with Star Trek fans, and I've known people who haven't particularly liked the shoot-'em-up nature of Star Trek in films like this or in other episodes of the different TV series at all. Anyway, they don't see that as Star Trek. They see Star Trek in this very pure, you're out there discovering new stuff and you're not getting into fights like this. So I wonder if those people just aren't happy in general with Star Trek being a big action film. Whereas I think maybe yourself, me certainly, I see fights with the Borg. I think this is great. I think it's very exciting. But I know some Star Trek fans might not think of that as being pure Star Trek, whatever that might mean these days.
Yeah, it's a really interesting dynamic. I can remember as a teenager watching The Next Generation and enjoying a lot of it, but also sometimes being a little pissed off at just how dry it could be. And there's one particular episode I remember well that you build up to this big confrontation between the Enterprise and the Cardassians, and Picard opens all channels. He says, you realise if we start a fight here, it could end up in a war, and that's really bad. And the Cardassian captain goes, oh, you're right. Guess we better all just, go home then? And I remember as a kid being sort of very unsatisfied. And then, but that is the ideals of Trek and the fact that, you do go to violence as the last resort. And I think it's clever that what Deep Space Nine then does is say, well, let's take those morals and those values, but put them against enemies who force the Federation to make unfederation-like decisions. And I think that's what's really clever about Deep Space Nine. And the Borg were meant to be that as well. You look at the introduction of the Borg in Season 2 in Q Who, which is a classic episode, and they are shown to be this enemy that is so big and bad that the Federation is out of its depth. And then the best of both worlds, again, recognised as a classic, is meant to be that what do you do when the enemy is so powerful that we can't defeat it? How do you do that? So if anything's going to get you there, it's the Borg, and that's right. And it does work. I'm not saying the movie fails because of it, but I do look at some of those Picard scenes and just think, this is not the same character. This is actually a completely different character. But I'm also in that group, Rob, that when you hear someone swear in a Star Trek movie, you go, ooh, that feels just wrong. And, I like swear. You've heard me off mic, Rob. You know that I can...
Certainly have.
I can swear pretty well. I like TV shows that have a lot of very good swearing. Hey, we're Australians. We can drop it all. But there's something about hearing a Star Trek character drop an S-bomb when it makes you go, ooh.
Yeah.
Not sure about that.
Yeah. While you were talking, I was just thinking that earlier I said, they didn't reinvent the Borg for this. I was thinking very much in terms of just the Borg, like the look of the cube, the look of the Borg, etc., etc., etc. But of course, they do introduce something new to this film. I hope people have been out there shouting at their speakers. The Borg Queen, Dave, is new in this.
Yeah, so let's talk about the Borg and the Borg Queen. Rob, you've started, so keep going. What are your thoughts?
It probably becomes a bigger conversation when we get to Data. So there are things I might save up for when we talk about Data. But in a broad sense, I like it because it gives some personality to them. Rather than just being these sort of zombies who shamble around and sometimes don't even attack you because they don't see you as a threat, so they don't even attack. They just shamble past. I think adding this very charismatic, very sexy lady is quite interesting and useful, and I can certainly see how it serves the plot and how a writer would have been just gagging to get that in there. Oh yes, now we can have the Borg actually communicating in this new way with our cast members. That's exciting. But then it gets to the Data stuff, and I'll wait till we talk about Data, maybe.
Yeah, I definitely felt that the Borg Queen here was the Borg's Davros. That sense that the writers struggled to write dialogue for the Borg, so they needed to bring in some sort of leader figure who could do that. Yes. And that does work very well in terms of the plot. Alice Krige is phenomenally good in that role. That is just a wonderful performance, and she helps to make the film. Now, again, do I sort of sit there with my almost sort of theological Trekker hat on and sort of say, well, the whole point of the Borg was that they were a collective that had no personalities, and now we've given them this queen, and does she just sort of, die here and come back somewhere? How does all that work? And yeah, I see that, but look, the movie wouldn't work without her. But that's kind of a minor technical point, because this is the movie that re-established the Borg as terrifying. We had, as I said, Q-Who, they're terrifying. We had Best of Both Worlds, they're mostly terrifying, although at the end of that two-parter, they have to be defeated, which is always a bit of a problem with your big, scary villain, is once you've defeated them at the end of the episode, where do you go? And in full TNG style, they went for, well, what if we found the nice side of the Borg? And so you had stuff like Borg and Descent, which are both terrible, and really sort of new to the Borg. So this is the one that says, nah, we're going to bring them back, and they're going to be scary as buggery.
Yeah.
I think the introduction of the little nanite tubes, where they basically could just sort of sting you and suddenly you're turning into a Borg, is a really terrifying, clever thing to do, and the effects look great. I think that the way that Frakes films them is really, really good. Lots of point of view shots. That wonderful, infamous shot where they open the doors and it's just sort of fog and mist, and then the lights, the laser beams start shining out, and then the Borg just relentlessly advance. They are actually shown to be nasty, scary, terrifying. Picard's reaction to them is equally scary. And this is the Borg that we then go on to get introduced into Voyager. And I don't think every episode of theirs in Voyager works, but they have a lot more that do work there.
Yeah, completely agree with all of that.
Speaking of the Borg, Rob, I want to talk about the very first space battle, which is interesting because if you're a long-term Trek fan, you're coming from Best of Both Worlds with the Battle of Wolf 359, where an entire armada of Federation ships goes up against the one Borg cube and is wiped out. And of course, Captain Sisko was on board one of those ships as a commander or a lieutenant commander, I think, at the time. So, that real devastation. So seeing this battle happening again, you're like, oh, it's like Wolf 359. and it looks really great, as you said. The moment when the Defiant comes in with the Klingon theme, you're like, yay, Worf, oh, Defiant, awesome. It's a really good battle. It looks great. They've got money. I'm curious, though, Rob, when Picard says, hey, everybody, focus your phasers on this point, and it just blows up the cube, is that because he just knew that was a weak spot? Is it because he knew, if we all fire our phasers at the same spot, then it'll work? Like, did he know that beforehand? Could he have sent a message to them and said, hey, I know I'm not invited, but aim for this spot, it's really good? And he's like, well, if they're not inviting me, I'm not telling them the Borg's weak spot, so... It
makes him seem like quite a prick.
It does. So I'm not quite sure what was meant to be conveyed. As somebody who watched this for the first time in 20-something years, did you pick up any of that?
I must say I didn't. Clearly they're playing it as, from his time in the Collective, he knows the weak spot. He knows, like, the Death Star exhaust port spot of the Borg cube sort of thing. But yeah, it does call into question why he's never relayed this to Starfleet before and said this is how you bring them down if they attack again, or at least when the battle breaks out to tell somebody. You've opened my eyes to that. I can't not unsee or unhear that now, Dave.
Yeah, and look, a theme we're going to, I think, come back to again and again in this chat is, do I see a problem with it in the cold, hard light of day? Yes. Does it make for an awesome moment in a film that he keeps the plot moving and moving and moving? It does, so I guess it's okay.
Well, I've got something in that vein, because something I've discussed in both of our alternate galaxies so far is this near obsession, at least as far as I see it, that Trek has with quoting literature to appear more deep. And we're at it again here. Bloody Moby Dick again. This, of course, is casting Picard as the modern Captain Ahab, which I guess at least flips it on its head from Wrath of Khan, where Kirk was facing an Ahab-like character, because Khan was the Ahab character. And here it's the Starfleet captain who's the Ahab character. But I think it's well done. The scene where it comes to a head, like Lily's like, oh, you broke all your little ships. And then we layer on that, hey guys, we're doing Moby Dick. Can you see? It's Moby Dick. Do you get it? This is Moby Dick.
Yes, if his chest were a cannon, he would have fired his heart upon the beast.
Yes, at least when it comes time for that moment, Picard says those lines very quietly. Almost sadly. He doesn't boom it out like, I'm going to give you some Moby Dick now, like it's Shakespeare. And then doesn't she have a line like, oh, I never actually read it?
Yes, that's right.
Which I think nicely, very nicely undercuts the whole thing, going into this kind of more pompous quoting shit thing that I don't like. So I do actually give it a pass. As we're saying, in the cold light of day, it does actually still get a pass. I'm not wild about the literature thing in Star Trek. I'm not wild about quoting things to seem deep. I'm doubly not wild that they did Moby Dick twice in Trek, but they do it well enough, Dave, that it still gets a pass.
Yeah, I think that's right. The other reason why they have to do it, of course, is to try and explain why this cerebral Renaissance man, Jean-Luc Picard, is suddenly now acting like a prick and doesn't care about the welfare of his crew and just wants to keep fighting and destroy them. And I think that they are trying to find some sort of intellectual justification for that change in personality. And look, on first viewing, I bought it. So it does work. But when I look back now with a sort of a critical eye, as I say, it's like, okay, you're casting him as Ahab to explain why he's now John McClane.
Yeah. Right,
okay, fine. But it is good, and I think I just have to say that I do love that pairing of Patrick Stewart and Alfre Woodard. I think it's a really good dynamic that works really, really well, and she's a good enough actress to stand against Patrick Stewart and really make it work, which is good.
She's very unlikable to me when she first comes on. Clearly the Starfleet people want to help her. Clearly they're not Borg. Clearly they're the people to go with. But she's still sort of railing against them as well. And it's like, come on, they're clearly the goodies. I don't know, maybe that's just me. I don't like her when she initially comes on, just with the way she's acting and behaving. But I quickly warm to her, absolutely.
Yeah, I sort of got it as somebody who is a product of a world war, that she probably is a bit more... not xenophobic, but just very cautious about outsiders. So
okay.
I kind of get that. But look, I think she ends up in her really good place. The one thing that I did find myself thinking as I watched this, though, is that it's very clear that Lily's a big part of the Phoenix project. She talks about how she was the one that scraped together all the titanium to make the cockpit of the Phoenix, and she's clearly well involved. And it's that none of the Enterprise crew, when they meet her and she says, "Oh, hi, my name's Lily," they go, "Oh my God, you're Lily. I've read about you too." It's just, she's just completely gone to history. Having gone and seen Dogma at the cinema a couple of weeks ago, I sort of have Chris Rock's voice in the back of my head going, "See, all the black people just erased from history." But it is a little funny.
Yeah, but that's the theme of Zefram Cochrane as well, because he's like this flawed guy. He's greedy. He's a drunk, and yet fast forward to the Next Generation's time, and he's revered, and it makes you think, well, when we look back at history now and we read about these great people in history, what sort of people were they really, when you actually know them as a person, not just as some, they did this and they did that and that was very good in the history books. And so that we construct these personalities for them based around all the good stuff. But what were they really like? Yeah,
and I also was amused at this idea that we all know that Neil Armstrong was the first man on the moon, and a lot of people could tell you that Buzz Aldrin and Michael Collins were the other two members of the crew, yeah?
Yeah.
Cochrane took a 3-man ship into warp space.
This is something I did think about, actually.
Has nobody at any point gone, "Hey, who were the other two dudes?"
Yeah, that is something I did think about. Even from the point of view of, okay, we're going back in time, guys, or we've gone back in time. We can't mess things up. And next thing, they're jumping in the rocket with him.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's one thing to do that in 1996. It's really funny to think about it in 2025. In the age of dash cams and selfies and all the rest of it, that there's not a single photo of the inside of the Phoenix.
Yeah. Funny.
But let's keep talking about Zefram Cochrane. It's a really interesting idea. I think you nailed it really well there, Rob, about this idea of this person who is revered in the future is actually a pretty normal guy with actually very human motivations. It is difficult to tally the character of Cochrane here with the character of Zefram Cochrane that we see in the original series episode Metamorphosis, which I did rewatch earlier this year when I was doing a bit of a classic Trek rewatch, or at least I started to, but it was so boring I gave up. That is a terrible episode. But in that one, Cochrane's a very just dull guy. And in this one, he's anything but a dull guy. And so it is a bit of a reinvention of the character, but it works, again, both because it makes the movie more fun, but it also works because you get that, as you say, that real sort of intersection of the history of the man and the reality of the man.
Yeah, and I did a bit of reading on this, and although the character was written with James Cromwell, the actor who plays him, in mind, this is one of these things that we come across in Doctor Who so often and many other shows. They did have someone else in mind, and that was Tom Hanks. He was floated for the role by Paramount, although Rick Berman, as the producer, said it was never really that serious. And Jonathan Frakes said it would have been a mistake to cast him because he's so well known. And I got thinking about this, and I thought, I'm not sold on that, actually. I think you could have someone like Hanks in there because he is a very good actor and he can sort of play all sorts of roles. But because the crew are fanboying over Cochrane, it would actually feel quite right to me that they're fanboying over someone we know is famous. We know is famous because it's Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
I think that could have actually worked. But again, it wasn't that serious, and they did write the role with Cromwell in mind, etc., etc.
Yeah, and Cromwell does give a really good performance. It's one that's absolutely sort of made for him. I agree. And I think it is actually interesting that they do talk about Cromwell as being a relatively unknown actor, because he really did come to stardom quite late in his career. I think he just had his big breakout movie in Babe only about a year or two before.
Wow, yeah.
But now I of course think of him now as former President Newman from The West Wing.
Of course.
Of course. You mentioned before, Rob, you wanted to talk about Data, so I think this is the moment. Let's talk Data.
Well, he gets the cheesiest part of the film to my mind, and in fact, when you were written on the run sheet, there's something you hate the most, I thought this might have been it. Because 90s Star Trek does seem to fall down this hole a lot of sexiness in quotation marks, where it's like the writers wanted to show this future where sexuality is open and involved, but the tone and the costumes and I think the limits of network TV always make it seem buttoned up. So you get Riker doing this sort of perpetual smirk, like, you know, hey ladies, smirk. You get Troi's cleavage in the uniforms. You get this sort of everyone gets horny on the holodeck subtext and everyone's having sex with pretend people on the holodeck. And in this movie, the Borg Queen literally seduces Data. Like, she strokes his skin, his new skin. She breathes on him. She talks about flesh and temptation. But it has to get filtered through this sci-fi metaphor as being about humanity and corruption and all of this. And it's so on the nose, it's almost a parody. You know, you can feel the movie's trying to be adult and dangerous, but because it's still Star Trek, everything still has to be dressed up as philosophy. I said almost a parody because I think it's still, it just works. It just gets there, Dave. But it's, oh God, it's cheesy. Oh man. I sort of cringe at this bit of the film.
Yeah, I think that a lot of that dialogue is saved by the fact that Brent Spiner is a very good actor and particularly a very good comedy actor. And I think that what they realised over the course of TNG was just how good an actor Brent Spiner actually was, but again, how good he was at comedy, especially physical comedy. And listeners, if you've never seen Brent Spiner in some of his guest appearances in Night Court, they are on YouTube, and he's just a very funny actor. I do think that does mean that when they get to the movies, they're like, well, everybody loves it when we give Brent a funny line, so let's find some funny lines to give Brent. And sometimes they do come out of nowhere, and it's a bit like a committee sat down and said, oh, we need a funny line, put one in there. Yeah. It does come across, but again, Brent Spiner makes it work. And in there are some also quite good ones. I find the Queen's how was that for you line to be really forced to just like, oh, really? But on the other hand, the one that I have a real chuckle from is the how long has it been? 8 years, 4 months? which is actually quite a very funny line. And yes, I can remember watching that in the cinema at the time, and my nerdy brain was going, yes, that would be the correct time to go back to season 1's The Naked Now. Yes, that's the last time Data got action. Yep, good continuity, well done. So I will admit I was sad, did do that maths as I was watching that scene.
Oh, wow.
It does, though, highlight the extent to which, as TNG went on, it kind of became the Picard, Data and Worf show. Not nearly as bad as Voyager sort of became the Janeway and 7 of 9 show, or sometimes Janeway and the Doctor show, but you know, the breakout stars of TNG were very much Picard, Data and Worf. And you can sort of see that in this movie. They're like, okay, well, we want to do a movie about Picard and Data. Worf could have some cool moments on the Enterprise. You know what, let's just send all the others to Earth and ignore them. You know, you can really sort of feel that, and particularly as notorious as it is, you know, The Next Generation was famous for having 2 regular women who survived past the end of season 1, and they just never got good plots and barely ever got anything intelligent to say. And in this movie, again, like, Beverly Crusher gets like 1 scene, maybe 1.5, and Marina Sirtis as Deanna Troi gets to go down, get drunk, forget how to do Troy's accent, and then nope, she's not in this either. So that thing of not having good... Well, they've got good female characters, they just don't use them, is there again. And I guess, again, you know, Deep Space Nine comes along and gives you Dax and Kira and you know, really good characters like that.
Well, Gates McFadden even got chucked out of TNG for a while.
She did. They brought on Diane Muldaur, who was cool.
Yeah.
She was really cool. I liked her. But yeah, so you just do see this thing of, okay, we're going to give Patrick Stewart lots of good scenes. We're going to give Brent Spiner lots of funny scenes. We'll give Worf lots of action scenes. And, that's all the cast, isn't it?
Yeah.
And in fact, it even goes to the fact that watching this time, I really felt that there was no connection at all between the Enterprise plot and the Earth plot for most of that movie. Once Picard goes back up to the Enterprise, without even saying, those are the temperature conditions of a Borg cube. Maybe the Borg are on board number 1. I'm going to go up and check. There's nothing, to the point that at one point Riker's like, we've lost contact with the Enterprise. Oh, well, we'll just keep going. There's no connection between those plots.
Well, it's almost like in some meeting, Patrick Stewart said, I'm going to be on the Enterprise doing Die Hard. And Frakes has gone, well, I'm going to go and do some funny shit on Earth. And we'll just glue them together.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's very true. A number of interesting cameos, Rob. We get Dwight Schultz returning as Lieutenant Barclay, who had some, fan favourite episodes of the series. Robert Picardo from Voyager turns up as the holographic Doctor, and Ethan Phillips, who played Neelix in Voyager, turns up without his makeup on. It's a little interesting cameo. Again, no one from DS9 rocks up because it's the black sheep of the Trek family.
You're not bitter at all.
Not bitter at all. Any other cast or characters that you particularly want to highlight, Rob?
No, I think we've covered them well. I think Lily and Zefram Cochrane are the important ones. I talked Borg Queen. And as we've mentioned, Crusher and Troi are a bit out of the action, so there's not much to say there. Geordi gets around and has some fun scenes. Of course, he doesn't have his visor here, but there's probably not much more to say about him.
No, and I believe it was a condition of signing on that LeVar Burton said, I'm not wearing the visor. I don't care how you work it. I don't care what you do. I'm not wearing that visor again.
Mm-hmm.
One scene we haven't mentioned, Rob, and I think we absolutely must, is the scene on the outer hull, which is, I think, one of the absolutely amazing highlights of this movie. It is a great visual scene. It is a great action scene. It feels genuinely tense. It's clever that they've taken Lieutenant Commander Redshirt out with them so that someone can get killed in that battle. And Worf's try hard, die hard lines actually do land. And again, because Michael Dorn can just deliver a, Arnie-style one-liner better than anyone else on the cast. So that just is, I think, absolute perfection from start to finish. Yeah,
tense would have been the word I use, yes.
Well, speaking of tense, any comments on Jonathan Frakes' direction?
I think very good. I think he balances. We're talking about how there's like the Patrick Stewart Die Hard story and there's the Jonathan Frakes mess around on Earth story. I think he balances it very well. Although it does feel like two movies when you think of the plot, in terms of how it all comes together, it still feels cohesive. It's still shot in the same way. I think he does very well for someone who, I assume he learned how to direct while on TNG?
Yeah, he absolutely did. As did a number of members of the cast. But Frakes had a really good reputation as a director of episodes on TNG. I do partially suspect it's because most directors on TNG were told to do the house style. And Frakes was like, I'm Jonathan Frakes, I'm going to do something different. And everyone goes, hey, wow, this is a Jonathan Frakes directed episode. How cool is that? And I'm not sure he was meant to, but he does have standout episodes of the series, and he's very, very good. And he's very good here. He keeps the movie moving at a really fast pace. I was really sort of impressed as I watched this and sort of going, hey, we're only 25 minutes in and we've done all of this. And, we've still only got 25 minutes to go. We've got to do all of that. It never lets up. It's really fast-paced. He makes good use of the new Enterprise sets, which are actually designed to be filmed in a movie, unlike the Enterprise D. And, it's dark, it's scary, but also they make good use of the location footage, and it all comes together. Yeah, big plus for me.
Yeah, thumbs up. Dave, I want to briefly mention, look, there were times I'd be watching this and it felt like TV more so than a film, and I'm thinking it's because I watched it on Blu-ray, because there were scenes like where they're running around the forest looking for Cochrane, and they seemed like a nice high-res video, almost like you would film on an iPhone these days, like you go and film your mates running around the bush on an iPhone. I almost fell out of the film at that point because it didn't look filmic. And I've seen some stuff about Blu-ray releases cleaning things up a bit too much, and I'm wondering if that was the case here. So it's not so much a problem with the film or Frakes' direction or anything like that. It's maybe the lack of grain and the super sharpness, maybe the size of my telly. Apparently 4K releases can be a lot better for this. Again, it's on a case-by-case basis, so maybe not. But the Blu-ray I watched made this feel very strange to look at times.
Yeah, I didn't have that note, but I did notice that, this movie looks like it was made in 1996.
Okay.
The final thing I want to talk about, Rob, is the music. We've discussed the music for the 3 Trek movies we've looked at, and I've been a big fan of all of them. I'm a big fan of this one again. It is by Jerry Goldsmith, who has done the themes for a number of Star Trek movies before. What we know as the Next Generation theme he wrote, but of course that was first done for previous movies, done the motion picture and Star Trek V. It does, though, highlight to me, again, how much this feels like a sort of a coalescence or an apotheosis of that late 80s, 90s Star Trek. Because this is the guy who did the theme to Voyager, he did the theme for to TNG, he's done a lot of those things. And so when I watch this theme, it's wonderful, but it does sort of feel like we're bringing everything good about the 90s together in this movie, and this is going to be just peak that. And maybe it's all sort of downhill from here, as I said when we started.
Okay. I didn't take much away from the music. There was music, and it can't have been egregious because I didn't come out and think, oh man, that music sucked. But I'm not sitting here a week later still humming it. I mean, I know the TNG theme, of course, but in general, I'm not replaying it in my head. And I don't do that with a lot of movies, to be honest, but some I do. Like, I came out of Gladiator, and I was like, oh my God, that music, I was in love with it from day one. So I do like film soundtracks, but this one, it wasn't horrible, but it didn't sort of stick with me either.
Yeah, maybe that's because I'm a lot more plugged into this era of Trek than you are.
Yeah, quite possibly.
Quite possibly. So, Rob, we've discussed our various points, our various views, but we're going to bring it home the way we always do with these little alternate galaxies. And I'm going to say to you, Rob, what was your least favourite thing about this rewatch?
I've gone through it. It's the Borg Queen seduction. Okay. It's the cringiest part by a comfortable margin, Dave. It's a scene that I think feels a bit off in an otherwise really tight film. It's like, it's a bit embarrassing. And a runner-up is... And it's quite some way behind, when I say runner-up, is drunk Troi at the bar. I know Marina Sirtis is playing it for laughs, but it feels a bit like a sitcom, like, oh, look, it's the one where the serious one gets tipsy, ha ha ha. It's a vibe that kind of undercuts the tension a bit, but it's a distant runner-up.
I'm not a fan of either of those scenes, so good call. But my pick is the moment when Picard does totally lose it and ends up destroying a whole bunch of spaceships with his big gun. And I just thought, look, we've already pushed the Picard character further than I'm comfortable with, and now he's such a bitter, angry dude that he's, throwing his rifle into the display cabinet. I'm just like, no, this feels really forced. It feels really out of character. I agree, as we said earlier, he does almost redeem it with that contemplative moment and with the chemistry between the two actors in that scene. But it was just a moment I've gone, no, this is just wrong.
Okay. You'll know why I'm laughing in a moment.
Tell me, Rob.
Favourite thing in the rewatch, Dave?
Yes.
The line must be drawn here!
Really?
Yeah. It's theatrical, but I think it's earned. Patrick Stewart really pours himself into it. And yes, he goes large. Yes, it's over the top. And I seem to recall in his memoir, which I listened to a month or two back, he said Jonathan Frakes would actually take the piss out of him about it and randomly slip into conversations like they'd be going to lunch or something and ordering, and Frakes would just suddenly shout, "The line must be drawn out!" But I like it. I think the Borg are smashing him. He hates these and he just goes for it. I am a sucker for a big speech in a film, Dave. That's all I'll say. That's
really cool that you liked it. That's really funny.
Yeah. The line must be drawn out!
Apparently.
How about you?
My favourite scene, and I suggest this is another example of how much more plugged into the Star Trek universe I am than you, is the actual moment of first contact scene. That moment when the Jerry Goldsmith first contact theme plays, the Vulcan ship comes down, and for the first time in Star Trek history, humanity meets another species. And it's the Vulcans, and there's that gesture, and that sense of everything we know about the Star Trek universe starts in this moment. All the explanation of the galaxy, the eventual founding of the Federation, that all starts here. I just think it's really, really lovingly done. And it also takes on a bigger sort of moment, knowing what comes afterwards, having seen that first season of Star Trek Enterprise, where there is all that resentment amongst the humans about, well, the Vulcans are holding us back now, and they won't share their technology, and they're being really arrogant. You sort of see that grows out of it. But also one of the great Enterprise episodes, In a Mirror Darkly, which starts with a cold open with that scene, but it ends in the complete opposite way and sets up a whole parallel universe episode.
Oh wow! I've not seen any episodes of Enterprise, so
yeah. If you've got Netflix, Rob, just go and watch the cold open for In a Mirror Darkly on Enterprise and text me your thoughts.
Okay.
Okay.
Will do.
So that was our conversation on Star Trek First Contact. Any final thoughts?
Dave, I'm not sold that this always escapes its TV roots. There are times where it does feel like a very especially polished two-parter. But then there'll be a scene or a visual or even a camera angle where I'm like, nah, this is a film. You wouldn't see that or you wouldn't do that on TV. And I guess when I reflect on that, I think it shows better than anything that it really captures the spirit of Star Trek and the spirit of TNG. You don't see this as a wildly different thing to the TV series. As I've said, it could be to its detriment a little, because you can think, oh, this is a kind of like a TV episode. But there's tight pacing, there's strong character work, the story never overstays its welcome, all those things we love in TV and film. It never drags, and even after all these years of not actively pursuing watching it, I can sit here and say this is absolutely very watchable, and I think it's no surprise or accident that so many fans apparently think the same. Yeah,
there are a lot of fans out there who will absolutely say this is the best Star Trek movie, or at the very least, the best Next Generation movie, and that's a very understandable point of view. I think that for a lot of casual viewers of Star Trek, this would be one like the one with the whales that they would remember, because it's got a much bigger mainstream sort of audience. There would have been a long time where I would have said it was my favourite Next Generation movie. I do feel over the years that this has diminished a lot, but it's more to do with another movie having gained a lot in my view as I've got older and appreciated it more. So I think it's probably now my second favourite TNG movie, but it's a very close run thing. Bottom line, for all the faults I've highlighted, this is an extremely enjoyable, fun movie to watch. It was no trouble at all to get through an hour, 50 minutes on this at all.
Yeah, I found the same. Yep.
Excellent. So that's our chat about Star Trek First Contact. For those of you who are not normally listeners to Star Trek Conversations, thanks for bearing with us. If you are here because of the Star Trek Conversation, come back for some Doctor Who maybe. You might enjoy it. Because we'll be back in a week with our monthly episode of the Doctor Who Show, where we will be talking about a novel that came out about the same time as this, in fact, Cold Fusion.
Yeah, looking forward to that chat.
Me too. So that's in a week's time. Then there'll be list makers and all the usual stuff at the Doctor Who Show. But until then, I've been Dave.
And I've been Rob.
And resistance is futile. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
There's a cube in space and it's heading for Earth. Picard's been there before. It didn't end with Merz. Starfleet says, hey Jean-Luc, maybe sit this one out. He says, yeah, no, and turns the ship about. So they blow that cube to hell, it's done. But a sneaky little sphere says, round to sun. They'll be changing history, committing a crime, and we'll all be assimilated right on time. Now we're fighting the Borg again. Just another Tuesday for Starfleet friends. The future's doomed and fine. We'll just go and fix it back in time. In a wasteland with a jukebox glow, there's a drunk guy we're all supposed to know. Zefram Cochrane, he's kind of gross, but history loves him the most. Meanwhile, the Borg have boarded the ship, filling the halls their tentacles grip. The Queen appears all charm and chrome. She flirts with Data. You're not alone. The line must be drawn here. Picard cries, while Borg drones stare with unblinking eyes. So Jean-Luc loses focus and draws his line. He's yelling at circuits like they'll toe the line. Data hesitates, then takes his shot. He sprays some coolant, ends her plot. The Queen dissolves her circuits in a puddle. Picard mutters, that wasn't too subtle. The Phoenix flies, the rockets ignite. Humanity's future is looking right. Make it warp, make it fast. We're fixing history at last. Down on Earth, the Vulcans arrive. Cochrane waits, humanity's alive. History is restored, the timeline's safe. Picard gets the credit, no debate. So make fixed, the stars align. They saved the world and stayed in line. Back to the future all on.